Hey there, Chris from Crux Interfacing congratulating you on the purchase of your brand new Crux SWRNS-63S wiring harness adapter, which is going to allow you to wire and install your new aftermarket radio to select Nissan vehicles from 2013 through 2019. Now in this unboxing, we're going to show you everything that's included with your new harness adapter, along with the instructions on how to get it wired and set up to your new aftermarket radio. Now this harness adapter works with a ton of year, make, and model vehicles from 2013 through 19 when installing your new aftermarket radio. Now more specifically for Nissan, from Altimas to Rogues, Muranos, Sentras, and Versas, there's a ton of different variations there depending on the model and trim of your specific Nissan vehicle. So let's go ahead and get this box pulled apart to show you everything that's included with this harness adapter interface. Now with the box all pulled apart, you can see everything that this radio replacement interface kit includes. Now you have your main wiring harness adapter here, which comes ready to go to be plugged into your select Nissan vehicle factory harnesses. Now no manual wiring is needed on the Nissan side, and it comes pre-stripped, labeled, and ready to be wired directly to whatever aftermarket radio you're choosing to install. Now FYI, we'll cover all these colors and connections in greater detail here in just a moment. Additionally includes your smart module and a very detailed instruction manual, which we're actually going to walk you through step by step to help you get it set up right the first time. Crux also includes an antenna adapter, a USB adapter to keep your factory USB working, 2 sets of steering wheel control cables depending on the radio you're looking to install, and additional notes based on that radio itself. Now let's take a closer look at the instruction manual provided by our radio replacement harness from Crux. Now looking a little bit closer at the instruction manual included with your Crux harness, here are all the product features that this new harness adapter retains when installing your new aftermarket radio. Now it does come pre-programmed to keep those steering wheel volume controls working with your new aftermarket radio. As mentioned before, it includes your antenna adapter, it retains your factory aux input, factory backup camera, factory USB input, and provides a reverse gear output so it triggers your aftermarket radio to cycle over to display that factory Nissan camera. Now also, new to this harness, it retains the factory Bose amplifier if equipped. If you don't have Bose, it's okay, this harness still works for you. And towards the bottom of the page, it's going to walk you through the wiring diagram of that main harness so you know how to wire it correctly to your new aftermarket radio. Now mind you, there's going to be 2 versions of a diagram, one with the amplified Bose diagram and one with the non-amplified Bose diagram found on the second page, which we'll show you here in a moment. So if you see that Bose logo in the vehicle, this is the diagram for you. If you don't see Bose, refer to page 2. Yellow is going to be your constant 12 volt that you'll wire to your new aftermarket radio. Red is going to be your accessory. Black is going to be your ground. Orange and orange white is going to be your illumination. And essentially here you're going to hook it up to the one that provides 12 volts only when you turn on your headlights. This function here, or the purpose of this, is going to dim the radio so it's not bright at night. Blue-white is super important for you to hook up if you have Bose, because this is going to trigger that Bose amplifier to turn on as soon as your radio does. If you install this and you're not getting any sound, if you have a Bose amplifier, it's because you did not hook up the blue-white wire to trigger that amp to turn on with your new aftermarket head unit. Now your speaker wire connections are a little bit different in this unit. If you have Bose, you'll notice that this harness comes pre-terminated with RCA connections. White's going to be front left, gray is front right, green is rear left, and purple is rear right. Again, pre-terminated with an RCA end. Because you have Bose, this is a low level input for that factory amplifier, and instead of wiring this to your new radio's speaker wiring harness colors, you're actually going to plug these into the RCA pre-outs on your aftermarket radio. You need a low level connection for your new aftermarket radio for that Bose amplifier to function correctly. Again, if you don't have Bose, we'll make notes on what to do with these here in just a moment. Brown-white is going to be your vehicle speed sense wire. That's commonly found, especially if you have wireless CarPlay, wireless Android Auto, or onboard navigation with your new radio. And finally, violet-white is your reverse gear trigger output. Also includes an extra black wire here, pre-terminated with a ring terminal for a chassis ground. Nissans are notorious for not having great grounds, usually ground through the chassis, not through the harness adapter. Newer Nissans are a little bit different, but Crux provides this ring terminal just to ensure that you have a good ground for your aftermarket radio. Now additionally, the connection here, the 12-pin harness, is what's going to connect into the smart module. Talks about the antenna adapter as well. The blue wire off the antenna adapter is your power antenna circuit. It's not for a power antenna itself, but it's for the antenna amplifier to get better reception. So it's advised that you hook that up. If your radio doesn't have a blue wire, like a Pioneer or something like that, you can also tie this into the red wire. Shows your USB harness adapter. This will specifically connect to the rear USB port on your aftermarket radio. If your radio doesn't have a rear USB port, this won't be used. And then there's going to be 2 sets of steering wheel control cables depending on the aftermarket radio you're looking to install. We'll help differentiate those in just a moment when we get to that portion in the instructions. There's some dip switches on your smart harness, which will show you what they do here in a moment. And then finally, Crux now includes an LED feedback diagram here to help you determine if your Crux smart harness module is functioning correctly. Now, a big note here, for amplified systems, do not cut the RCA audio output. If you have Bose, you gotta use the RCA connections for that low level input for that factory amplifier. We're on page 2 here. Now, as mentioned before, this is for vehicles that do not have Bose. Wiring connections are going to be just about identical, except for those speaker wiring connections here. As you'll notice that from the grays, whites, purples, and greens here, they no longer have a picture of those pre-terminated RCA ends. What you're supposed to do, if we scroll down a little bit further on the page, is modify those RCA ends, cut them off, and then what we'll do traditionally with wiring up an aftermarket radio is connect your speaker wire colors, color for color, to your new aftermarket radio. If you have Bose, do not cut off these RCA ends, as these will need to connect to your low-level RCA output of your new aftermarket radio. If you do not have Bose, you need to cut these off and wire these in traditionally. Just about everything else here on the diagram is just about the same as the Bose diagram as mentioned before. Now moving on to page 3 here, this is where we set up the dip switches, the 3 dip switches found on your smart module. Now these dip switches identify which radio you're installing, so those steering wheel volume controls are correctly pre-programmed to that selected aftermarket radio. What you're going to do is go through this list of manufacturers here and find the one that matches the head unit you're looking to install into your vehicle. When you identify that, for example, let's say we're installing a Pioneer radio, we're going to look through this list and it looks like Pioneer is located on the second line. We're going to follow that line to the right and identify that the dip switch configuration needed for our install would be off for number 1, on for number 2, and on for number 3. On is going to be indicated by switching that dip switch up. Now, a quick note, if you're installing a no-name branded radio that's typically running either Android or Linux, keep in mind that your radio label here is going to be considered most off-brand radios. So you're going to want this line item number 3 for your no-name brand, and your dip switch configuration is going to be off, on. With those off-brand radios, you're going to have a couple of additional steps to make those buttons work. Some aftermarket manufacturers that are no-name brand require you to go into the radio settings, into the steering wheel control settings, manually program each button to the button corresponding on the steering wheel one by one. Keep that in mind. It's not going to come pre-programmed if you have a no-name brand radio. For the connection to make those steering wheel volume controls work for your new radio, you'll have to determine which of those 2 steering wheel control harness adapters are needed. Now, option A has a little blue yellow wire hanging off. That's going to be for Alpine, Clarion, JVC, and Kenwood. Or if you have basically every other radio that's not listed for option A, you're going to use option B. If you have, again, one of those no-name branded Android or Linux radios, and you don't have the 3.5mm WR input on the back of the radio, kind of looks like an aux, but it's for steering wheel controls for the remote, you're going to have to cut off that plug end and wire those in manually to key 1, key 2, and ground. Finally, here at the bottom of the third page reiterates the vehicle applications this pertains to and how to differentiate between certain vehicles with navigation, non-nav, no CarPlay, things like that. Now, when you're ready to make the connections to your new aftermarket radio, we strongly suggest that you don't just simply twist and tape these wires together, or even worse, use wire nubs from home electrical. They're just not designed for an automotive application. So alternatively, when you're making your connections, we suggest that you either crimp or solder those connections. You can crimp by using butt connectors, or even better, crimp caps. Soldering and heat shrinking your connections will give you a strong connection, which will eliminate any potential shorts down the road. Now, one last quick note regarding your wiring connections here. Don't automatically assume the wire colors of your Crux side is going to match color for color 100% to the coloring of the new aftermarket radio you're looking to install. Every once in a while, a manufacturer on both ends may change a wire color, so always check the function of the wire. You're matching it with the function of the wire to your new aftermarket head unit. Here's your smart module here with those dip switches we mentioned before to set up for those steering wheel volume controls, and the 12-pin harness input, which will connect to your smart harness here. If you have a factory aux, this harness will retain that aux input if you're wishing to retain it. And here's your backup camera image output from the factory camera to the input of your new aftermarket radio. Here's the RCA ends. If you have Bose, these will connect directly into the outputs of your aftermarket radio. If you don't have Bose, you'll cut these off and wire these directly into the speaker wires of your new aftermarket radio. One final note, as included within your instruction manual here, if you have a certain radio and the steering wheel controls just aren't working, the voltage output of your smart harness may be too high or too low, and what you need to do is simply open the cover. There's a switch between 5 volts and 3 volts here. You may have to set that dip switch to 5 volts or 3 volts depending on where it is currently, and that may fix your issue. Now, if you want more information on this Crux harness adapter, we can link it down in the description of the video. Thanks again for watching. Be sure to hit the like button if you liked what you saw, and don't forget to subscribe. We post great content on the channel all the time. We'll see you in the next video.